Humans, we love control. And when we find out we can have more, some of us will adventure with invention. An evolutionary biologist once said his Darwinian observation: if you see an organism walking across the road, too busy with their phone to look up, they get hit by a car and killed. They were not fit to survive. This is a part of evolutionary biology. If you cannot adapt to technology, you don't have future fitness. So I thought to myself after hearing this, am I going to survive or thrive? And how can we get future fitness if technology is always emerging? A few of you might be familiar with these tools for creativity, productivity, and innovation. They're called design thinking, Scrub, Agile, hackathons, makerspaces, even scientific method. And I argue that these are great, but they don't address the person. I think they're only as effective as the people that are wielding them. With 2 billion people coming online by 2030, we need to be able to be future-facing with future of work changing, education, and our experience. We need to add one to the mix. And I think this one is called Inventure. Invention plus adventure. It's adapting and connecting to the foreign and familiar by having a mindset that is more upbeat, creative, and ready for change. So, to be an agent of Inventure, you need to have 5 things that you are focused on. The first one is orienting. That's your place. The second one is field. That is where you're going to put your purpose. Wield is next, and that is where your values go. Yield is where meaning is made, and then finally, you're going to be cultivating home. So, let's get you guys orienting. The first time that I learned about inner space and outer space, I was working in research. And what I was working on was the HPA axis. And that is basically the relationship between your hormones, your nervous system, and your immune system. And what we were working on was looking at how mindfulness changes your experience. And one of the mechanisms that is very important for this is in your eyes. And that is the foveal and peripheral vision. It's amazing how much it can influence your brain. So foveal vision is focused and sharp, and peripheral vision is out wide. And amazingly enough, it actually can change how your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system adapts to the environment. And inside of your inner space, this is what you're feeling. This is something that maybe people can't see. It's something that you have for yourself, and maybe sometimes you share with others. Out in outer space, that's stuff you can't control, but it still is influencing you. And actually, the inner space and outer space are working together. They come back and forth. And this is where I first learned about invention. And I thought, well, could I invent something that actually can help control this a little better? Do we have to learn how to focus our foveal and peripheral vision? And this is when I actually moved out of that field and onto another. So field. Field is an aspect of the environment. It's the area you're working in. It's sometimes maybe a football stadium, a grocery store, it's your career. It's something that in math and physics can be called the inputs, the outputs, and the displays. That's all great. But for our talk today and our purposes, let's just focus on what's familiar, what's foreign, and fatigue. Familiar is something that is warming to us. It's easy, it's a pattern. It can be something that actually is relieving for us. It also can be really boring. It can cause us to be oppressed and have something that's mind-numbing. And on the other side, there's foreign. Foreign is exciting. It makes us think about what we know in a different way. It can also be a little bit scary. Sometimes it can be off-putting. And our relationship to familiar and foreign is a huge aspect of how we are actually influencing this inner space and outer space. And as you might imagine, it's really hard on the brain. You get fatigued, especially if you have all these decisions that you're making. So I have a couple tricks that I use to keep my fatigue down. And I'll give you 3 of them. So the first one is that I love meaning and purpose. And so when I vote with my money, I want to give it to brands that I care about. I want to give it to people that are applying themselves just as much as I am. So one of the ways that I do that is by sticking to brands that I love and I've researched. Second is I do subscribe to a nutritional profile. I have spent time on my fuel, and I highly recommend you do too. I want my fuel that my body gets to help me in the best ways it can so I can do my best when I'm out in the field. And the third thing is I wear a uniform. Now, I have a little bit of a strange relationship with uniforms, partially because I wore them at school growing up, but secondly, it's because I'm an identical twin. And as an identical twin, when I see out in public other twins being dressed the same, it makes me sad because the world is being programmed that they are the same person. I remember one time when I was at university, a professor came running up to me in the hallway, tapped on my shoulder and said, "Jessica." And I said, "Yeah, hey, what's going on?" "I just found out. There are 2 of you." And I gasped and I said, "Oh yeah, there are. It's true." But really what I wanted to say is, no, there are not 2 of me. Thank you. So I think one of the things that's important in this message is that just because you might see something that looks familiar doesn't mean you might know exactly what it is. And I think that's why it's essential in creating these kinds of skills of controlling your familiar and foreign relationships in that inner space and outer space when you're orienting. So, speaking of skills, I want to talk to you about wield. Wield can mean to command with authority. And in this case, I want to talk to you about it with tools, skills, and then values. So, much like an adventure and an invention, it's actually not the process, it's not exactly the dimension, the destination, or the result that means anything. It's actually the process in between of adapting and connecting. It's that moment when you get to bond with people over the unexpected and be tolerant of something that you could have never conceived of. And this is a story that you might be familiar with that got me really excited about building inventions and being with people that are going to apply themselves completely in the moment. There were 3 people that were about my age, and it wasn't too long ago. They were on a spacecraft to the moon, and everything was going great. And they were doing some routine procedures when all of a sudden, fatal damage happened to their spacecraft. They had to abandon what years and months and weeks and days they had practiced in order to make something in a moment's notice, a new way to breathe. They had to reconstruct what was left of their spacecraft to be able to get the energy to get home. Now, they weren't alone. They were accompanied by Mission Control back in Houston. And not only that, the Apollo 13 crew got safely home. But these people had to be incredibly resilient. And resilient is something that I'm going to ask you to do as an agent of Inventure. You have to show it to people, but you also have to be that way. And this is why I say that leadership is not built through achievements. And I'm going to tell you why. Yield means 2 different things. Yield can be getting out of the way, surrendering. It can also be an amount produced. So when we think about yield, And I think about this because I'm a tech founder. I want to make products. I love the problem. I orient myself. I think about all the ways that I can field the situation, get the skills and the people in place, attack the problem, and hopefully yield results that help people, right? But more often than not, what happens is you create a giant probe. And why do I say this? Because your perception of the problem might not be what the market thinks and its perspective of the problem, of the solution should be. So this is why sometimes when you're applying yourself, you are creating giant probes. You just learn more about what you were working on, about the skills that were needed to do it, about all the types of things that are out in the field. And this is why mindset is essential. And Inventure is just like a party. You don't get one when you arrive. You have to bring it. And eventually, you go home. Home. Little did you know, the entire time you've been out, you've been orienting your inner space and outer space, you've been fielding purpose, you've been wielding your values, and you've been yielding meaning, you've been creating a deeper understanding of yourself, your connection to humankind, and your relationship with the planet. So with this in mind, welcome to the Inventure, and I'll see you at home.